The most surprising thing for me, when I was looking at the impact of the Bible, was the effect it had on slavery. Now, two things. First of all, I'd been told at university that slavery came about as a combination of the Enlightenment, economic conditions, and so on. Never mentioned the Bible. It's very bad when you just, because the fashion of the times, you cut knowledge out. We're not like that now, so we don't want to have been like then. And we don't have been like that then, so we'll cut all that out and pretend it didn't happen. So I came across what was really happening in slavery, and I was amazed by it, by the impact of it. And secondly, and most importantly, it's one of the two things, this is the first, there's another towards the end of this talk, which changed not just the English-speaking world, but the world, profoundly, and as far as we can make out, unalterably. Slavery has been in the records of every civilization that kept records. Everywhere you look, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, the Romans, the Greeks, right through. Slavery in this country, slavery in England up to 15th century, the Tudors had slaves. And what happened here was that slavery was abolished. It still exists. There's still slavery around the world. There's still, but the idea of it being absolutely part of human nature, something that was inevitable, something that was good, something that was blessed by God, that has gone. And it went because people used the New Testament as the lever to make it go. That's what happened when you look at the evidence. And it's a scandal that this is not brought into light, because it matters. Whatever your religion or no religion, it matters. And there are two or three ways to look at it. And let's start in London with William Wilberforce in 1789 in the House of Parliament, and he makes a 4-hour speech. Brilliantly transcribed, as they still do. There it is. It's supposed to be one of the greatest speeches ever made in Parliament. It's a little book, really. He'd done masses of research into what the slave trade really was like. He was a very wealthy young man. He'd had a dissolute time at Oxford, but he made a friend of the man who became the youngest Prime Minister in our country, the younger Pitt. He couldn't have manoeuvred his way forward without that help. And he dedicated himself to the abolition of the slave trade. Now, this was, again, very clever. The idea of abolishing slavery was as if you were saying to people at the time, look, quite soon there are going to be things in the sky, flying through the sky, full of people, and going all around the world. It was just something that was ungraspable. But getting rid of the slave trade was at least possible, and there was reasons for it, because he proved that it was such a hideous, horrible transaction that was going on. He was opposed mightily. Nelson, the great Nelson of Trafalgar, said that he should be whipped and taken through the streets and dragged to Tyburn. He hated him. He was spat at in the streets. He was a wealthy young man, and he needed his wealth. He had the equivalent of security guards around him. But he plugged on. And he was a convert to the New Testament in a passionate way. He read it every day. He lived by it. He wanted to force that idea that is in the New Testament. There is a thread through the New Testament which is a thread of egalitarianism, which is a thread of all people are equal. And he found texts in that, such as Galatians. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female, for ye are all one in Christ Jesus. He used that text. He had to use text because those who were for slavery, they had their texts. The Bible's full of them. If you want evidence, if you want, as it were, God on your side for the Bible, if you want God on your side, you can find plenty of evidence or plenty of search in the Bible. Noah cursed Canaan, son of Ham, and all his offspring, and condemned them all to slavery. And on it goes. So it was almost a battle of two books, the Old and the New Testament. Wilberforce forced it through. He was a bold man as well. In that first speech, he called in the Liverpool merchants. Now, the Liverpool merchants were making a fortune out of the slave trade, as were the Bristol merchants. A fortune. It was supposed to be somewhere between 25 and 30% of our commerce, this trade. And they sat in the gallery, and they came to listen, and it's reported at the end they wept, whether because they thought they'd lost the case or they were moved isn't reported. But there they were. And he drove it through, and in 1807, the world changed. the slave trade was abolished. And Pitt, his friend, got the Royal Navy on the North Atlantic and stopped other countries taking slaves over as well. It's one of the purest acts in our history, and we ought at least to acknowledge it. So that was one thing that happened. And then in 1833, slavery was abolished, and a slow domino effect went round the world from there. And that came principally from the King James Bible.